How we doing, everybody? I'm a little late starting. As you know, this is a tough time for all of us, but a particularly tough time for me. And I want to do this tribute, Mondays with John tribute tonight to my father, Denis, who is going into palliative care, or hospice, I guess, in the Philippines. And I hope you enjoy, maybe try and talk about him a little bit as the course of the hour goes by. It's very difficult for me, but I'm going to do the best I can, okay? And I want to thank everybody that made comments and some beautiful words and support for me and my father. I love you all. So I'm going to try and not get too emotional, but I want to start with my father's favorite tune, which was a tune called the Christmas Eve. some of the tunes. I'm gonna pull this camera a little closer. My eyes are a little glazed over today. My father was born in a place called Blackwater, County Wexford, 1937. And this is stuff that some of you may not know about my dad, or well, a lot of you wouldn't know because you haven't met him. But at the age of 2.5, his mother died, my grandmother, at the age of 20 in 1940. And my father went to England when he was 16 years old looking for work. And he was a humble man and never did anything fancy. He was a truck driver, never missed a day pretty much that I remember in his life. I even remember one time my father came home, he drove a truck and the truck overheated and he made the mistake of opening the cap on the radiator and got splashed all over his chest with boiling hot water. And he came home, finished his day at work and came home all bandaged up with blisters as big as this on his chest. And he went back to work the next day. And he always loved the music. There was only one accordion in the village of Blackwater where he grew up. And Eddie O'Brien had that accordion, and when he would put the accordion down, take a break and have a little drink of his pint in the pub, my dad would run over and pick up the accordion and try and play a little bit on the box. So that's how much he loved to play. And of course, when I was at the right age and he found my Palo Soprani, he started me on the accordion. So there's so much I could say, and I don't want to bore you with all that stuff, but it's important to me, and I hope you hang in there, because he deserves it. I'm going to play all tunes that my dad loved. And I just want to say that my dad didn't pass yet. He hasn't passed, but he's going into hospice and he's not good. I saw him a couple of days ago and he's not good. But I just want to share. Anyway, here's a Glendart. couple of jigs for you there, folks. My father loved all these tunes, and you know, I'm sorry, I'm emotional, and I hope you understand that. So at the age of 11, my father got a Palo Soprani, and he brought me to Brendan Mulcair for lessons at the Harp Club in Luton. And for those of you who don't know, my father never drank in his life, and my grandfather never drank in his life. My father's drug of choice was traditional Irish music, and he absolutely loved it. And he was instrumental with a group of people of starting a Coltas branch, the Luton Leagrave branch of Coltas, and he was a member of that club up until he left for the Philippines a few months ago. And but I remember that my father was always very helpful and very kind and generous with his time with people. And for those that know him, he was also a good man for telling a good joke. He would love to tell a good joke. Corny as they were, some of them, but he would always make you laugh. I've laughed at him my whole life, and I've heard him 100 times over and over. And anyway, I play a couple of hornpipes. He used to love Dunphy's hornpipe. Was one of his favourite, and the Boys of Blue Hill. So. So for those of you just tuning in, this is a tribute to my father, Denis, and I'd appreciate it if you could share it, not for me, but for him. If you know my father, and some of you do, I know I've seen some of the names go by, please feel free to say something about him if you knew him, if you had crossed paths with him. I'm sure if you did, it was a good meeting, and it certainly wasn't boring for sure. And so my father would take me from Luton into London, 3 or 4 nights a week, drive and knowing that he'd have to be up for work the next morning, and we'd end up in a session, whether it be at the Hibernian or in the South London branch or wherever it might be, and we'd stay as late as we could and then drive home. And we'd always stop at the rest stop. Back then, the motorway is not what it is today, and there's a little rest area as you get on the motorway heading back to Luton, and we would stop there pretty much most nights and have a little snack, a little treat for me after the session. And I never forget the one night that we were there. Stefan Grappelli walked in with a couple of guys. I guess, I don't know if they were his bodyguards or managers or whatever, but the great Stefan Grappelli walked in, and sure enough, my father asked him if he would play a tune, and he almost was. He was ready to take out the fiddle, but the people with him stopped him. But that was the kind of man my father was. He wouldn't be shy about asking somebody to play a tune and or helping anybody out. And I came here in 1980, but I hear stories about how he helped young kids in Luton after I left. He would go over to the house and give lessons or give advice or whatever it might be, and that was the kind of man he was. And but I remember doing a session in London another night, and it was getting really late, and he had to go to work, and the great fiddle player Denis was there, and he told my father, he said, "Don't worry about it." He said, I'll drive him home. And so my father left me at the session in Danny's hands, and sure enough, whatever time it was, I know it was late because he drove all the way from London to Luton and dropped me off. I know it was daylight, so it was probably 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and he drove all the way back to go to work that morning. And that's the environment that we grew up in, with people like that, Danny Meehan and Bobby Casey and Lucy Farr and all these wonderful people. And they all loved my father. You know, they all appreciated his love of the traditional music. And he was great at getting people together, even though he never drank, you know. So anyway, it's a little bit more about my dad, and play a couple more reels that he likes. I'm sorry if these tunes aren't what you might expect from me, but they were all the old tunes that he really liked back in the 70s, the stuff that we played in the 70s, and maybe just share this a little bit. This is, I don't know if he's watching, if he's able to watch, or if he even knows about it, but this is, you know, I want to pay tribute to him before he leaves this earth, which I don't think is very long from now. So, I think this is called Reel to Rio. are a few tunes there my father loved, and my father, he was a bit of a character for sure, and actually probably surprising to a lot of people. He wasn't really that big into the flaws, although I think he was proud that I did well when I competed. But he was really there for the social part of it, and to meet people like him that loved the music, and the parents that were trying to introduce their English-born children to traditional Irish music. And even though we were so close to Ireland, in some ways we were so far away too. And I mean, that was the Irish community in England at the time, where regardless of what part of England you were in, that there was this great renaissance in the 70s of all these people that immigrated that just couldn't bear the thought of not having traditional music around or not having their kids play. And so that was one thing that we enjoyed together, and of course going to the sessions. And he would never forget anybody's name, or he'd even talk to me up until a couple of years ago about sessions that we went to in 1978, and I tried to tell him, for crying out loud, I couldn't remember what I did last week, let alone what session I was at in 1978 and who was playing, and he would know who was there. He'd know everybody's name, what they played. So anyway, I'm sorry, this is I'm trying to be good here, but I think it's important. It's important for me, but I think it's important for him, that people that never met him and people don't know about him, that knew what kind of a man he was, and how much he loved the music and supported me. My father would sit in the room with me all evening, practicing, going over the same bloody tune over and over and over and over and over again, and he had the patience to do that, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you he wouldn't do much of anything else with me, but if it was music related, he'd be there all night. And he probably might not can play a game of darts or a game of pool, but I always laughed. We went to when I was at the Flower in 1973. I was at the Flower in Listowel, and I think I won the All Ireland the third year in a row in the younger age groups, and a guy came up and gave me his card, and wanted me to do a record. Of course, I didn't think anything of it, didn't pay no heed to it until a couple of weeks after we got home, and of course I had an English accent back then, so I said, Dad, this guy gave me his card in Listowel, and he wants me to do a record. And he was, Ches, he says, why didn't you tell me before? So of course, for those of you who have that record, that was the Pride of Wexford that I did, and I recorded in 1974. It was released in 1975, and we flew over to Belfast together to Outlet Records and Billy McBurney's house. We had breakfast at Billy McBurney's house, and then we went to Smithfield Square and recorded the album in one day with Kevin Taylor, the great Kevin Taylor, on piano. And it was a very proud moment for him. I knew that even at that age, that he was very proud of me there and supportive. So it was very exciting when all that stuff happened. So I'm going to try, he always loved the Blackbird, and it's a tune that I don't play very often, but I really like it, and for him I play it. But I never forget my good friend James Kelly's father. We met him on the street. I forget what, some kind of regional floor or something. And my father had a reel-to-reel tape deck, and John Kelly played the Blackbird as an air set piece and a hornpipe. And so my father always loved this tune. Blackbird. Like I said, my father had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and there was a big event in London in 1972 at the Irish Centre in Eaton Square in London, and Paddy O'Brien, the great Paddy O'Brien from Nina, and Seamus Conley were the guests of that dinner cultist event, and my father recorded the whole thing on reel-to-reel, and I still have it today. I still have a bunch of reel-to-reels that he recorded, live recordings. But I learned the concert reel from Paddy O'Brien that day, and my father was a great lover of Paddy O'Brien's style of playing, and he made sure that I really followed him greatly, and I wanted to pass that along to Eileen, that Paddy was one of my heroes, but he was also a great hero of my father's. So my father always said that's the way to play the accordion, the way Paddy O'Brien does it. And so I'll play that, the concert reel, and the one after it I forget the name of it. So tell your friends, don't forget to share, and if you have any comments, for those of you just checking in, if you knew my dad, feel free to make a comment or anything like that. And he's not gone, but he's not well, so I'm sure if he's watching, he would love to see that stuff. Okay, so this is the concert room. You go to concert reel, and yeah, my father loved that stuff, and I'm just gonna have a little sip here. You know, I don't know if people think I should, wait till he passes to pay tribute, but I thought that if he ever got a chance to see this, that I could pay tribute to him before he passes. For those of you joining, my father is going into hospice, I guess, or I can't even say the bloody word anymore. It's been a rough couple of days. I didn't think I could get through this, and I'm still very emotional and very sad about the whole situation. My father is in the Philippines, and so there's no way for me to to see him, and this is the best that I can do for my dad. I'll play a couple of old polkas because he loved the old polkas. And, let me. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm losing it. We'll try that again, right? Oof, sorry about that, folks. And it's getting really hot in here, but anyway, I'm sorry. I I am emotional, and I'm doing my best. I'm emotional at the best of times, and at the most this time I'm very emotional. But I was thinking of a couple of jigs. I think I was 13 years old when my father brought me to Clare. I can't remember exactly where it was. Brendan Mulcair had a few of his students. I guess we were at Florida or something, and or we were on holiday. I forget what time of year it was, but we were waiting in this pub. It seemed like forever, of course, because we were so young, and we were waiting for the great Joe Cooley to come into the pub. And sure enough, my father had his trusted reel-to-reel tape deck there, and Joe Cooley showed up and played a few tunes. And I never forget, my father asked him, would he play a couple of waltzes? And he did. And my father recorded a couple of waltzes, and I still have that recording that my father did of Joe Cooley. So he always loved Joe Cooley style of playing as well. Loved his little phrasing and the kind of feel that he put into the music. So I think great old reels, and these are all tunes that I know my father loved and asked me to play many, many times. My father brought me into a session one night in London, a place called the Balloon Tavern, and some of you who, if you're on here from England, would remember this back in the 70s. And Con Curtin was a lovely fiddle player, and his son Sean Curtin actually did the Cultus tour with me in 1979, the Cultus tour of America. But Con would have these sessions, and I remember being at a session one night, and I can't remember what time it was, maybe 2 in the morning when we left, and we came outside. Of course, you know, bars in England back in that day were not supposed to be open until 2 o'clock in the morning. My father got in a car, and the next thing, there was a squad car, a cop car there, and the cop got out of the car and came over and tapped on the window for my father, and he said, "Excuse me, sir," he says, "if you've been at that party over there," he says, "and you've been drinking, I would advise you not to be driving." And my father said, "No, yeah, it's all right," he says, "I'm a pioneer, I don't drink." but you know, those kind of things didn't really happen that often in England, you know. But I remember that, and coming out of that pub, and the fear of God when the policeman came over, thought he were going to get arrested. So, but then I remember another time we picked up Paddy Fallon from the airport. He was coming over for the Cultus tour, and my father just got a car, actually a lovely car, a Volvo, and it didn't have the wing mirrors. We call them wing mirrors, rear view mirrors, you know. And my father, as I said earlier, was a professional driver. He was a truck driver his whole life, you know. And for those of you who've ever been to Heathrow, you know when you come out of Heathrow, there's a big, huge roundabout. And he was coming around the roundabout, and he cut off a cop, and he got pulled over. And the policeman came over and said to him, he says, "Do you know you just cut me off over there?" He said, and my father said, "Jez, I'm sorry, officer." He says, "I didn't have me wing mirrors." He said, "I just got the car." He says, "I'm sorry, I didn't see you." He would talk his way out of anything, you know. So he goes, well, you better be careful, mate. He says, you know, and off we went. And then one more story. I'm going to finish soon. But my father, I was living over here, but I heard the story. My father told me the story. He was in O'Connell Street in Dublin. About 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm going back 20 years at least. And he was waiting for a bus. And he got surrounded by a bunch of young kids and a knife to his throat.
Oh my God.
And
Wow.
they wanted his wallet and his money. And he gave him the wallet. And of course he said, Jesus lads, he says, "Could you ever give me my license?" He says, "I drive for a living. I need my license to drive." And sure enough, they gave him the license. And then, without missing a beat, he says, "And while you're at it," he said, "could you give me £1 for the bus?" And they did. They gave him back £1 out of his own money for the bus and took off with the wallet. But so those are the kind of stories, things that happened to my father all these years ago. And anyway, so I'm gonna play. I'll play an air and then maybe a couple of reels. Thanks so much. The time actually went by quite quickly. I'm really oblivious actually to most of what I've just done the last hour, but I appreciate you spending time with me, and it's such an emotional time for everybody, not just for me, but this is particularly sad for me at this time. But I'll play an air and a couple of reels, and God bless you. Then I'll see you again next Monday. Mondays with John under hopefully a little bit more normal circumstances. But if you can and you feel that way inclined, say a prayer for my father Denis. And you know, the miracles do happen. A miracle of prayer, you know. So you just never know. So this is a tune I wrote called "From the Heart." From the heart, for my dad. I'll finish with a couple of reels, and I was just thinking, I learned the tour, the Shesky and Keeley Band came out with this record, and I think it was just called the Shesky and Keeley Band. It was the Black Album for LP, for any of those who remember that. And P.J. Hernan played a tune with the grass band. I can't remember the name of the bloody tune, but I learned to play this tune from that record. And my father didn't like it. He loved PJ's playing. In fact, I think my father got PJ one of his first gigs in England. But he said, Jay, you know, that tune is too low. He didn't like it because it went too low on the keyboard. And so I was having a session one day with Brendan McGlinchey, the great Brendan McGlinchey, at the Slough Irish Club, and we'd be there on a Sunday. And I said, Brendan, I just learned this reel from the Shesky and Keeley Band record, and my dad doesn't like it because it's too low, you know. So he said, go ahead and play it, he said. So I played it. I played it a couple of times, and before I was ready to stop, he leaned into me and he said, play it one more time for the old fella, he says. So it was Brendan McGlinchey. And we got up to some good development there. But so I'll give it a shot. I haven't played it in a long time, and thank you again for everything, all the kind words on my Facebook page, and it touched my heart. It really did. Some beautiful comments there, and you know, I love my dad, of course, you know, like most people, and this is difficult times for everybody, and I know that I'm not the only one dealing with stuff like this, but maybe I'm one of the few with an outlet like this that I could share, and I hope that was okay for you today. So this is for you, Dad. So I'll see you next week, okay? Take care, everybody. Love you, Dad.